Channel open. Welcome back to WeeklyTrek, a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions podcast network and presented in partnership with TrekCore.com. I am your host, Alex Perry.
What's today's date? The date.
Today's show was recorded on November 18th, 2022, and is current through the Star Trek Prodigy episode Crossroads, so beware of spoilers. All right, let's get into the show.
Good day, Voyager, and welcome to A Briefing with Neelix. It's a catchy title, isn't it?
WeeklyTrek is a regular news show covering the biggest stories from the Star Trek franchise. We are in a new golden age of Star Trek. There are 5 television shows in production, possibly more on the way, and enough merchandise to fill the Bajoran wormhole. There may be a few less live events than we were thinking. So stick with me, and I'll help you sort the real facts from lots of the Dominion propaganda that you'll find online. But I can't do this alone, and my guest this week is returning guest and co-host of the Shore Leave podcast. It's Marina Kravchuk. Marina, welcome back to WeeklyTrek.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me back. This is exciting. It's been a while.
It has been a little while, but hey, it's a big week for convention news and not all of it good. So there was nobody else that I wanted to talk about it with. Well, before we get to that though, because there's plenty negative for us to talk about this week. But before we do that, you know the drill. I want to know something's got you excited about Star Trek at the moment. What's got you moving at Warp 10?
Do you know something? I find myself in a limbo at the moment. And I don't know if it's because we had a pretty intense year this year in terms of like events and stuff coming out and all the announcements and the teasers and the Star Trek Day and you name it. And I kind of like arrived to the end of the year with a sort of like, the screeching halt of the brakes where I'm like, you know what? I actually need to stop and like not do anything for a moment.
Sure.
So I am I can't really offer anything except to like say that I'm very hopeful for next year because we do have plenty of things to look forward to next year. So I'm kind of taking stock at the moment, and we will speak about certain things in a little while.
Yeah, we will.
So right now, like I can't say that I'm super excited about any one particular thing. I'm just generally like I'm rereading my favorite fan fiction as like comfort food.
Oh, I love that.
But that's probably it. And I'm looking forward probably like as far as like sort of any kind of shape of long-term goals, I suppose I'm looking forward to Star Trek Cruise. But at the moment I'm sort of in limbo. Yeah, that's a good summary.
Yeah, I think that sounds pretty similar to how I'm feeling at the moment too. In addition to being extremely furious and upset. But again, we will get to that momentarily. So let me tell you something that I'm feeling good about Star Trek this week, which I am actually feeling good about. And that is Trek Unlimited have released their latest, like, cool little Star Trek homeware item. And it's one that's like hits the real sweet spot for me. And this is a set of Starfleet themed storage crates, which sounds like it's like, really, Alex, you're getting all excited about a set of Starfleet themed storage crates. And it's like, hell yeah, I am. First of all, I'm a Star Trek fan, which means that I have way too much stuff. There's so much stuff in this room. There's so much stuff in my basement. It's all in boxes. All in various different kinds of boxes. And now how cool is it that I get to put them in a Starfleet themed box? There's 2 different kinds. You can get original series themed or you can get next generation themed. I ordered a set of each of them because of course I'm crazy like that, and they're collapsible and they ship really fast. I ordered mine on Wednesday. It arrived today. It's Friday. So like it's great, and they're not going in the basement. Those ones are going to hold some stuff up in my room and in my office where I just have like too much stuff hanging out that I need something to put it in. And so, yeah, I'm really excited about this. It's one of the first new products we've gotten from Trek Unlimited in a little while. I know that there's a lot more coming. Other new products have been teased. So it's like a really cool, like, hello again from Trek Unlimited, and looking forward to more of the same because the work they do is really, really great.
Yeah, Star Trek Unlimited is the best. John just has the best things out there, and it's super excited. I'm actually curious because he kind of hinted that there's more stuff coming, and I was like, I want to see.
Yeah, well, I guess he teased on Twitter like
yes. Yeah,
like a Vasquez Rocks.
Oh yes, and I've seen that he brought a prototype to one of the conventions, and it was like, that's pretty neat.
I love it.
Yeah,
just like something to put in your garden. It's terrific.
Yeah, and then of course you can get like miniature Gorn and just do like a little thing.
Have a great time. All right, well with that, let's turn to the week's top stories.
There's a war going on, and I'm a reporter.
Well, after months of silence about next year's official Star Trek convention, Star Trek Mission Seattle, and we have covered the silence on this show in extensive detail, convention organizer Reed Pop has both shocked and disappointed Star Trek fans this week with their announcement that the convention will actually not be happening. After careful consideration, the decision has been made to not move forward with the Star Trek Mission Seattle event in 2023. The brief and mealy-mouthed statement from Reed Pop said, "We are working on new ways to bring our favorite Trek fans the optimum experience, and we look forward to celebrating together again in the future," whatever that means. What I know that isn't is a promise that there will be future Star Trek mission conventions. Reed Pop, who picked up the license for official Star Trek conventions from Creation Entertainment and launched what was to have been a series of annual Star Trek conventions, beginning this year in Chicago, moving to Seattle next year, and then moving to other cities around the United States in future years, apparently seem to have concluded that they can't successfully pull off 2 official Star Trek conventions in a row. What a travesty. Say what you want about Creation Entertainment, the previous license holder, and there is much you can say, but I attended every official Star Trek convention they held between 2011 and 2019, and there was never any doubt that the convention was going to go ahead, and the official convention had been running for a number of years before I even got into the game. Reed Pop, on the other hand, failed to get past the first convention. Star Trek Mission Chicago's success and the excitement that was meant to propel us into Seattle apparently didn't last longer than 6 months. What an absolute shambles, a slap in the face to Star Trek fandom, and a stain on both Paramount and Reed Pop that they weren't able to get this figured out. Ultimately, we don't know why Mission Seattle is not happening. Neither Reed Pop nor Paramount have given any explanation. But a pox on everybody's house when a Star Trek convention, fandom's original live event that has been a bedrock of the Star Trek community for decades, apparently isn't possible with the support of supposedly one of the world's biggest and best event organizers and supposedly one of the world's biggest entertainment conglomerates. Both of the corporations have absolutely bathed themselves in valor in this particular sorry affair. So as things stand, there will be no official Star Trek convention in 2023 on dry land, and Star Trek fans deserve much better than that. Marina, what was your reaction to the cancellation of Star Trek Mission Seattle?
Well, it's the word that has been repeated multiple times that I've seen so far by our fellow podcasters and by various online commentators, and that's disappointed in probably every shade that you can add to that word, simply because, well, as you said, of all the things that we've experienced, seeing how the conventions have become so much mainstream, regardless, whether we're talking single franchise like Gallifrey
Right.
or Star Trek conventions, or we're talking the monsters like San Diego and New York Comic Con, it seems almost preposterous. Yes, there are most definitely a whole lot of things still dragging from pandemic years. That's a fact, and then we can still see effects in quite a few conventions. But regardless, we can probably talk until the tribbles hatch why exactly they decided not to do it, but it just seems a bit, God, what's the word? Yeah, disappointed. I'm just disappointed that this has come to this. And the thing is that I'm the person who always very much, glass half full type. I can
Sure.
see, all the, yes, buts, so to speak. But in this case, it seems like, well, my first thought was, well, our little peanut of a convention. You compare it to everything else that Reed Pop has in its lineup, and it seems almost like, well, of course they would ignore us. And it is a slap in the face to the fandom, but Star Trek has always been sort of like a thing apart. Comic-Con stuff just does not work on it, evidently, because, yes, Chicago was sort of the first in a row, but technically it was the second mission convention. We already had New York back in 2016 for the 50th anniversary. So, obviously something has to become up customized to kind of fit the way the fan base expects it, the way the fans work, the way it fits the franchise with all our multiple productions out there right now. And yeah, it boggles the mind that, if they decided, okay, we can't fit it into between Florida SuperCon and Emerald City Comic Con and C2E2 and all these huge events that they're dealing with through the year, which I'm sure is an extraordinary stress and burden. But say something, because the original promise, if memory serves, was that we would hear something by June.
Tickets were supposed to go on sale in June of this year.
And nothing happened. And then there was nothing in terms of even like, well, just say when, not give us information, tell us when you're actually going to give us, expect something by end of summer, something like that. There was complete and utter silence and, nothing online, nothing nothing through customer service until we kind of get to the point of, okay, we're already in the fall. And of course, in the fall, nobody's going to reply about questions about Star Trek convention because, New York Comic Con is happening. It's the tentpole event of the second half of the year in the world. So again, who's going to care about our little convention? And then, until you kind of push and shove, and then somebody accidentally spills the beans, which is what, it came across as that final reply, somewhat oddly phrased from the customer service, where everybody just kind of shakes their hand and throws their hands in the air and kind of says, well, if that was the decision probably months ago, how come nobody bothered to just put some sort of statement and just say, sorry, like we're working on it or something, instead of making it literally a slap in the face to every, convention going fan out there.
I mean, the part that really gets me is we kind of forced them into this, right? I don't want to take credit for it happening this week.
Yeah, you weren't the first one to contact them. That's the thing, is that there was just complete silence until, I don't know, maybe that particular Joey, quotation marks, just didn't know that he was supposed to keep mum.
Right.
Chances are.
Yeah, I was just annoyed Sunday afternoon, and I decided I wanted to fire off an email to some kind of Read Pop customer service, and I was like, there must have been an email address associated with Mission Chicago. So I'm going to search through my emails, and I found the email, and I just sent an email saying, people are saying on Twitter they are hearing rumors that this is going to get canceled. Like, can you give us any information? And I got the kind of weird response back from customer service basically saying it's not happening. And then I thought about so TrekCore immediately reached out for comment, like, hey, we've gotten this. And I was like, well, do I wait for official comment or do I just let people know? And I'm like, no, people have waited long enough, right? Like, it's 6 months until this thing is happening. And this is the first.
Yes, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the thing is that a lot of people who are either vendors or, folks on the other side of the table who are involved in this, who obviously had to have some sort of connections, finding out the information, tables, what have you. They haven't heard anything from them either.
Right.
That's the thing. So it's like, it's one thing, like fans reaching out to customer service and being summarily ignored. It's quite something else when you have somebody who would be, a licensed dealer at the convention saying, I haven't heard anything in a while.
Right.
And what's more, the event apparently is not even the convention center's schedule, by the way. So it all kind of accumulated to a point where it's very hard to kind of well, not to have positive outlook. I mean, I have a couple of thoughts on like why exactly they decided not to do it. And chances are, if they are keeping the license, maybe they will come up with something. Maybe it's not going to be conventions. Maybe it will be like pop-ups. Maybe we will become sort of as an official entity. I'm sure. I mean, we have enough fan-run conventions out there still, so unofficial ones. But the official thing may become like some sort of like an adjunct to whatever big Comic-Con du jour, such as New York Comic-Con or maybe Denver, maybe what have you. But, so I'm still kind of hopeful that something will come out of it, or that we at least get some sort of further output trying to explain what happened.
Yeah.
But, who knows? This half a year silence is just a little bit damning.
Yeah, like, how do you come back from this, right? Like, if you're Read Pop, and like, I left Mission Chicago fully in the tank for Read Pop. I was like, yes, it was the first one, and yes, there were growing pains, and yes, there were things that people didn't like about it, but I came away from it being like, hey, for a Read Pop event, which I've been to a couple of, and I was at Mission New York, and, I was like, this was cool. I really liked this, right? Like, this was fun. It was at a good time of year. It was a good event. There were a decent number of like exclusives and little trailers and teases and cool panels, and they got decent talent from the shows. And so I came away from that feeling like I'm ready to wash my hands of Creation Entertainment and move on to Read Pop, right? I'm ready to be a champion for the Star Trek mission conventions, right? Like, I'm ready to be a mission convention super fan. And like, I'm totally gutted and turned off by this experience, which means that if I feel that way as the guy who came out ready to be a shill for them, like, how can they repair it from here, right? Let's say they were to decide they wanted to do another mission convention in 2024. Well, first of all, you haven't said that at this point, right? Like, it's not like they said, really sorry, 2023 is cancelled. We're going to bring you information about the next mission convention as soon as we can, right? No, all they do is talk in like roundabout terms about potentially finding some other way for us to meet together down the line, right? Like, how is anybody going to be interested in any kind of official Star Trek event that Read Pop wants to do when they couldn't even put together the second Star Trek convention? They handled it so badly, and they ended up having to cancel it.
Yeah. Well, I'm not exactly in a category like this, switching from, I've done enough conventions where I can see pluses, minuses of every single host, and you kind of like adjust yourself to whatever the parameters of a given convention, and you kind of run with it. Creation does things their way, ReadPop
Yeah,
does things
sure.
their way, Fan Expo does it third way, and so on and so forth. But what I thought when Chicago convention ended was not only like, oh, I was full, like, oh, sure, I'm going to give benefit of the doubt. There hardly has ever been a convention where I'm like, I'm really having a bad time. That never actually happened. And I've been too close to 80 right now, but probably. But I was impressed that I don't know if you actually came across some of those people. Sunday afternoon, there were actually folks from ReadPop
Yeah.
walking around interviewing people,
Yeah,
asking
you
for
and me
feedback.
talked to them for a while.
Yeah, feedback. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm skipping my brain.
No, you're
But
okay.
they were asking for actual feedback, and they were writing it down. It wasn't just a random, let me make it look like I'm doing something. No, there was a genuine request for feedback that was taken down. It looked very serious. So I was like, well, maybe they will adjust the formula a little bit, because
Right.
certain things, again, I'm repeating myself, but they do not work with the way the Star Trek fandom works at the convention. And so I wonder what happened. Like, was it some sort of a much higher level decision that did not involve people? It's like specific team that deals with Star Trek brand at ReadPop. I doubted that they would be the ones to kind of say like, yeah, we're really not ready. Let's skip a year. It has to be somebody higher up saying, yeah, we need to either not do this or wait a bit and see what we can ramp with. Because if you notice, like if you've been to multiple ReadPop events, they all very formulaic in the way they set them up. Like if you looked at the description of the tickets, for example, for ticket for Star Trek Chicago this year, it was exact same boilerplate as they had for Florida SuperCon.
Yeah.
Like identical down to like every word and period and comma. So, obviously you have to perhaps, put a little bit more in terms of like, let's modify it a little bit. Like Destination was a modified version of the Comic-Con. They had their own issues, and I have my own thoughts why they got canceled. I don't unless we hear something specific, which I doubt, I think that there were additional forces at play there. But with this one, I would love to. I would love like something. Give us a snippet, like explain yourselves. It just so, even though like we've had 6 months of silence, nevertheless, it almost comes across like, well, great, now what?
Yeah, right. You care so little about us that your explanation, your entire announcement and explanation fits into the length of one tweet, right? Like, we got 280 characters worth of consideration from the powers that be at ReadPop and at Paramount about the future of official Star Trek conventions. Like, just take that by itself, right? Like, that sucks. And like, why do we then owe them anything going forward if that's how they treat us? Like, I hate doing this, right? I hate doing episodes where I have nothing good to say about the companies and the licensees associated with Star Trek. But like, this is terrible. This is an awful way to treat the fan community. And just, it was handled so badly from start to finish, combined together with then the cancellation of the Destination Star Trek conventions over in Europe, which again, say whatever you want to about Showmasters, and there's so much that people can and have said about their events, which I never got the chance to go to. But like, what a damning pattern of behavior this year in terms of live events, and how unimportant they apparently are to the companies involved, and potentially to Paramount as well, when they have been such an important part of the Star Trek fan community now for 50 some years. It just boggles my mind.
Yeah, and something I've been thinking is that there most definitely is a disconnect between, all the involvement and, well, first of all, for all the output. We have 5 productions on at the moment, and with additional at least 2 probably coming along at some point in the future. So things are happening. We have stuff, being, especially on social media, we have this unparalleled access to the creative staff who communicate with the fans, and once actually all of this kind of trickles into physical space at the convention, you get the same thing, this amazing back and forth, this feedback between the community, the fan community, and the creatives. And then, but the organization of the event itself seems to be completely disconnected. It's like, I almost wish that the creatives had some sort of like say in what happens with the conventions, how it all set up.
Yeah.
But it's all completely disconnected. Somebody else is in it and evidently not even aware, which, as an example, the issues of hosting during Star Trek Chicago convention, where people went, this was really, really odd. Surely
right.
somebody must have attended the Star Trek convention before to see how it works. So it's this disconnect. I think that's what the trouble is. And again, I just want to know, I would like to know what's going on, because it just seems illogical. Yeah, that's it. That's the perfect word. It seems illogical, seeing how much is actually going on in a very productive franchise that Star Trek has become over the last decade, to, kind of not having a physical outlet for it in the form of some sort of event. I don't know. I just again, everything I can come up with is just completely half-assed guesses to what could have possibly been. I'm sure there are wrinkles we're not even aware of. Oh, most definitely. But at least somebody to take care, sit down, and at least write out not an ambiguous thing, but just say, we're trying to work this out. We're having issues and we'll get back to you. But yeah.
Or commit to the future of it, right? Like, for me, whatever happened to 2023 Mission Seattle happened, right? The litany of potential reasons that people have raised, ranging from the section of the convention center they were going to use is not finished because of a strike from the concrete makers union, and therefore it's not going to be ready in time, and so the convention can't happen, to it's a holiday weekend and nobody wants to travel, to they didn't make enough money out of Mission Chicago and therefore it just doesn't make the math work for Mission Seattle. Paramount doesn't want to do it anymore. They canceled Destination Star Trek, so now they're canceling this one too, and they're getting out of the live events business, full stop, right? Like, all of those reasons, whatever. But the fact that it's just like, no, the 2023 Mission Seattle convention isn't happening, and no, we're not willing to tell you what the kind of like future of live events, Star Trek official live events, is going to be, is the part that really gets me, right? If it had just been like, sorry, 2023 didn't happen, we'll see you in 2024, like, great. Okay, give me something to, something to look forward to. But the fact that it's just like, 2023 isn't happening, sorry about that. It's just like, again, it's so disrespectful to us. And the fact that they probably are going to come back and ask for our money. And I don't want to give it to them now because I feel like I'm being taken for a ride.
Well, let's see what they come up with. Let's cross the bridge when we got the planks, because at this point, I'm not quite sure what exactly is they looking for in terms of what this, ideal premiere event for official license is supposed to look like. Because so far we've had several tries, and it's obvious that there is something particular that the powers that be had in mind, and they obviously haven't achieved it. And I'm sure there've been plenty of reasons why it hasn't been achieved. I mean, in case of Chicago, there was a lot of potential, and yeah, the convention was not very full, primarily because it was one of the very first in-person events coming out of all the restrictions that we had after the pandemic. So, of course, stuff wasn't happening the way it would be if it were like in 2017, 16, especially in the middle of 50th anniversary. But then again, look at Mission New York. There's a lot to say about that one, and it has been said about things did not work out entirely perfectly there as well. But bottom line is just, I don't know. I'm gonna sit back. I have enough experience with the conventions, and I want to see what they will come up with. And then just stay back with caution and just see what they offer. I go every year to New York Comic Con, so I have plenty of experience of the specifically Read Pop approach to how they do conventions. Now, granted, New York Comic Con is a very much in class of its own, given its size and very specific ticketing requirements and so on and so forth. But they can put on a huge event. They can put on an event, period. So I'd love to know what the heck happened, and I'd love to know if they are capable of reworking their formula in order to come up with a Star Trek event that would, perhaps not 100% please everyone, but at least would be indeed, a premier event, something representing the franchise properly. Well, at this point, we'll see. I honestly don't know. It's sort of like everything just dropped this week, besides the things that are going on in our social media sphere that affect most of the fans online. But it's been sort of a strange week where it's like this feeling of emptiness. I am looking forward to other things that we still have. I mean, STLV is still the biggest event for me, so I'm most certainly looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to the Star Trek Cruises I already mentioned. So that's going to be the two sort of like hanging points for my next year convention going experience.
Yeah, I mean, first, we'll see everybody in Vegas next year, right? Like,
oh yeah, absolutely. But it's like at this point, Vegas is Vegas. Like it cannot be compared. The fact of the matter is, like, yeah, Bally's did not work. You could feel it ruined the atmosphere.
Yeah,
but STLV is it's a fixture. Whether you call it official, I mean, it was a Star Trek convention for how many years before it became the official with the whole title and everything. We're still going to celebrate Star Trek as we always do for the whole weekend.
All right, let's put that story to bed and move on. Mission Seattle, bye-bye. Well, Star Trek Prodigy head writer Aaron Waltke gave an interview to TrekCore this past week about his recent Prodigy episode, All the World's a Stage, and other elements of the back half of the show's first season. About the origin of All the World's a Stage, Prodigy's latest meta episode, Waltke said this: "Whenever we sort of brainstorm high concept ideas for Star Trek Prodigy, we always sort of have this wish list of fun stuff we want to see. And one of them was, of course, the TOS sort of cultural contamination episode, probably best represented by episodes like A Piece of the Action, where they left a dime store gangster novel behind on another planet, and then somehow, fast forward 100 years, the entire world is like 1930s Chicago. So we had that sort of floating in the back of our heads, and then we would have sort of a brainstorming sessions that we call blue sky brainstorming, where we would all just sort of come up with one-off ideas. Deandra Pendleton Thompson, one of our staff writers, just wrote the phrase on the board, all the world's a stage, because she comes from a theatrical background. And then she wrote, they arrive on a planet and they're acting out captain's logs. My imagination was immediately piqued by that, because I was like, first of all the world's a stage sounds like a TOS episode with their penchant for Shakespeare. Then also the wheel started turning in my head like, well, how do they get a hold of these logs? And then it spun out from there and slowly built to the idea similar to how Kobayashi didn't start with bringing back a bunch of cameo characters. It started with the idea of putting Dal through the Kobayashi Maru. And of how they chose Ensign Garavik to be the unfortunate ensign, Waltke said, quote, as we were kind of chalking out who would stick around to teach them enough about Starfleet, but then ultimately be left there, we thought that a red shirt would be the right choice. And we started talking about which TOS red shirt would fit the bill. Somebody brought up that it could be Ensign Garavik, who was a really interesting character. He's one of the few background characters that had a full sort of arc to themselves. Obsession was like a Kirk Garavik episode, and you're almost ready for him to like sit down next to Chekhov and join the bridge crew at the end. And then he was never seen again. And so it just felt deeply appropriate. The other bit of kismet was that Garavik might be one of the few minor red shirts to have ever survived an away mission, but then he disappeared afterwards. What happened to him? Did he die after all? And so whether you call that the final destination or what for red shirts, I think that I wanted to give him sort of a heroic ending where you got the sense that maybe a little bit of Kirk did rub off on him after all post-obsession. And looking ahead to this past week's episode, Waltke talked a little bit about the decision to evolve the character of Murph. Quote, we don't know much about melanoid slime worms. The reason we thought to have Murph go through his own metamorphosis was that he, like the rest of them, is growing through changes and growing up, Waltke said. I suppose it was a kid-friendly way to deal with puberty, among other things. We want the characters to grow and change with our audiences. They're growing up. You'll see how Murph continues to evolve, not just physically, but as a member of the crew. Marina, how much have you been enjoying the last few episodes of Star Trek Prodigy?
Well, first of all, I suppose I can say that it's not entirely truthful to say that I'm not like excited about something. The one exciting Star Trek thing that has been part of my life over the last couple of weeks is most definitely Prodigy.
Hell
it's the
yeah.
one thing that quite literally, it just makes me happy. You know, and it's like without going into kind of any deep analysis or picking out the favorite, fan service moments, it's just like you watch it and after that, it's just this wonderful warmth inside because the Hageman brothers and Aaron Waltke have truly produced a masterpiece in every imaginable way. Literally, it's like I'm looking forward to what are they going to come up with next. I mean, this past one, Crossroads, it just like there's so many like little things. It just all falls into place and it's beautiful. So yeah, Prodigy makes me genuinely happy. So and in this case, yeah, it was fantastic. I really enjoy when Aaron, well, obviously when he does actual interviews, it's always a wealth of information. I also enjoy when he replies to questions from either fans or like podcasters and other websites on Twitter. That's always exciting because all the little bits and pieces pop up and he just explains things and he just grows the franchise, whereas he grows the canon. As of this recording, the most recent thing I'm sure, make sure to check out while Twitter is still there, is a wonderful back and forth he and also David Mack had with Trek Movie earlier today, discussing certain things from Crossroads. It's just marvelous. So yeah, as far as this particular, I know that they wanted to pick up the original series, but there was also other, like immediately I was thinking about Muse because there was from Voyager.
Sure.
Immediately I thought about, as far as corrupting the society by, when something stays behind, or in this case, I immediately thought about Friendship One, actually.
Yep.
When
absolutely.
Again, Voyager. So it's amazing how it all kind of fits. It's a new way of doing basically the type of story that we've had before, when the Federation / Starfleet accidentally does something to expose themselves, to leave something, to send something, to that something that basically quote unquote corrupts the undeveloped society, or pre-warp society. It's exciting, and I'm amazed that they managed to fit it all in like literally 20-30 minute chunks. It's a form of art, I think, the way they managed to do it.
And I loved this past week's episode, Crossroads. I thought it was so good. It was so wonderful to get Admiral Janeway versus the Protostar, and some of that, like seeing some of those shots from the trailer of the Dauntless facing off against the Protostar. Like that was just all so cool.
Do you know something that was funny thing somebody posted, and I forget which platform did, that moment when Dauntless, you see it behind and you realize just how tiny Protostar is.
Yes.
And it's exactly like, I saw the picture, I'm like, oh my God, that's it. Like I did not realize that, but I was
was it Finding
thinking
Nemo?
about the same thing. No, it is the moment when in Finding Nemo, when Bruce the Sharks leaps up from behind. Incidentally, and it's probably something that maybe I should tweet at Aaron, maybe he will reply. I'm curious why they keep always saying Vice Admiral Janeway. And she, I think at some point says, I prefer Vice Admiral. That's, like in terms of like informal, when you address and somebody who has the Admiral bit in there, unless I'm mistaken, please, folks who served in the Navy, please correct me. But I believe you only would use Vice Admiral in a very formal address situation. Otherwise, it would be just like, Lieutenant, Junior Grade, Lieutenant, Senior Grade, you just say Lieutenant. Lieutenant Commander, you just say Commander. And same thing with Admirals, Rear Admiral, Vice Admiral, Full Admiral, except for Fleet Admiral, I think. But you just address them as Admiral. Meanwhile, they were just so very specific. Like, she's the Vice Admiral.
Yeah.
Do not step over that line. Yeah.
I'm just really loving this season. I'm a little on the fence about the Murph redesign, but hey, change is hard and difficult, and
that's exactly what I was thinking. Like they had to do it sort of like when kids would go, oh no, and then I was like, well, yeah, things change. You're gonna change.
Yes.
So I'm still in love with Murph the way it is. I mean, I will treasure my plushie Murph I got at New York Comic Con for forever. I'm actually curious if they will now have to do a modified plushie because Murph has changed. Is that the reason we still haven't had the other one released? So yeah, we'll see what's good. I'm actually curious. Like, well, what if
he changes every 10 episodes?
Prodigy is going to be like a full adult with like
right.
Just like little purple spots remaining around the ears or something.
But probably still speaking in the same language.
Yeah. Oh, too much fun. Too much fun. Yeah, Prodigy is the light.
Oh, it sure is. It is the light in a now cold and dark winter.
Kind of like to tie into this whole thing that they keep, like all this information that keeps popping up online. I love this thing that they've done on Instagram with Kate Mulgrew recording Vice Admiral's logs.
Yes.
Where it's like somebody actually, they're like, oh yeah, they just doing this thing. It's like the Linus with his popcorn and everything. And meanwhile, Aaron's like, I wrote this. It ties into what's going on. And it's like, it's part of like, I hate saying this, but it's part of the canon. But bottom line is it does. Like it's what, it relates to whatever's actually going on in the given episode. It's marvelous.
Yeah, it's great. And it's nice because it sort of, gives us some of those more kind of in-depth canon connections that the show, because it's a kid's show, sometimes doesn't go into, right? Like the first one where she references that the Dauntless was designed by B'Elanna, right? Yeah, like something that's right. Yes. Unlikely to come up in an episode unless B'Elanna appears, but is something that's perfect for that kind of behind-the-scenes detail.
All the little digs when she's like, honestly, who can drink tea from the replicator? And people are like, oh, burn on Picard. Oh, it's just too funny. Yeah, but I love the way they approach everything. It's all very wholesome and very comprehensive. It's like no stone unturned. I'm sure they would put out even more if they could.
Well, get your wallets ready if you want to own a screen-used prop or costume from Star Trek Picard's first and second season. The auction of screen-used pieces by Prop Store, which was announced earlier this year, has started and will run from today through November the 29th. In total, 303 lots are being offered from Star Trek Picard, ranging from Picard's Confederation Timeline com badge to Number One's dog tag. Like the Discovery auction before it, this is expected to get expensive, so be prepared to temper your expectations accordingly if you are planning to bid. Marina, did you have any favorite pieces that you saw when you were looking through the selection on offer?
Yes. First and foremost, and it's actually not Picard related, but and this is not the first time I've seen, well, not specifically one of these, but just as a category of an item, Nimoy's camera.
Yes.
But it's several have come up in auctions previously, and it's just amazing. Like, we all know that he was a great photographer.
Yep.
And here's an opportunity to actually have one of his tools, if you will. And of course, the fact that it's something that was donated by the family, and it's something that the proceeds will actually go to support COPD research. So that is probably the one thing that I was looking at the most, although it's unfortunately beyond what I can probably afford.
I think it's already up to $5,000,
Yeah,
and there's
I'm
10
not
days left in the
surprising.
auction.
Completely not surprising. Out of the specifically Picard ones, I think it's still the painting. You know, I've seen a
Yep.
version of it. I don't know if it's the same one that they had on display in 2020 on board of the cruise, painting the daughter that Data did, of his children, if you will, because the Daj and Soji basically look the same. It's beautiful. I love the fact that they got an actual artist to paint an actual painting. It's just beautiful. Ties TNG and Picard very nicely together, I feel. So yeah, I do like how some of the com badges look, but at the same time, it kind of like, I don't know. Do you find it a little bit odd? Like, normally we come across prop auctions that have Star Trek costumes or, you know, any kind of pieces, props, and it's almost always something that's like, yeah, this is from, you know, 1987. This is from mid 90s. This is, you know, something that has a history. Meanwhile, this is all almost like, this is brand new. It literally, they just used it a couple of years ago, and here it is. You can get it. It just feels a little bit kind of almost unusual. I don't know.
It's happening more and more, and Star Trek kind of started it, right, when beginning in 2006 with the Christie's auction, and then from 2007 through 2010 with the It's a Wrap auctions, selling off, you know, the sort of giant warehouse of props and costumes from the Berman era. And then since then, like, studios have seen that there's something that can be monetized there, and have been kind of, you know, doing that by, hey, it costs us too much money to store it, so we're going to sell it all off. And like, yeah, they did it with Discovery season 1 and 2, and now they're doing it with Picard, and I'm sure they'll do it with Strange New Worlds once that's over with, and I guess they'll probably do it for Picard season 3 once that's over with.
Yeah, it feels like it speeds up. So there is a certain,
it sure does.
It lacks, I don't know, historicity to it. I don't know. There's a word to it. Yeah, because like, you know, you look at a lot of things that Prop Store. My goodness, I love the videos that Adam Savage usually puts out on the Tested YouTube channel, with like, he goes to Prop Store and just checks out, and every once in a while something pops up that's like, you can only, you know, call it iconic because it's something that has been out there for some time, and, you know, probably people haven't really seen it. And in this case, it's like, it's almost like, yeah, I just literally saw that episode 2 years ago, and here it is.
Yeah, there's some cool stuff. There's some badges and a bunch of costumes, a bunch of Starfleet season 1 Picard costumes. You can get the chairs from 10 Forward from the opening scene of Remembrance, which, like, I obviously don't have room for a giant chair like that, but I just find myself, like, strangely compelled by the idea of having a 10 Forward chair in my house. A bunch of other stuff, right? Like Rios's soccer ball from the season finale of season 1, a bunch of like Chateau Picard type stuff, the Promelian battle cruiser in a bottle that was in Picard's study in season 2, some phasers, some other like costumes, Q costumes, season 2 Confederation costumes. So there's a bunch of fun stuff here. It's a little underwhelming compared to the Discovery season 1 and 2 auction. There are not quite as many like truly iconic primo pieces as that one had, right? Like that one had like Michael Burnham's and Gabriel Lorca's and a bunch of like iconic characters. And there are some kind of, you know, decent costumes here, certainly a decent number of Picards, but mostly not like the most famous costumes from the season. They seem to have kind of held back some of those. And I have a theory about kind of what's not in this auction and what that means for future Star Trek, but I'm going to hold that for the end.
So what is your favorite? I'm just curious.
My favorite. So for some reason, it's these 10 Forward chairs. I'm just like, I want one. I'm not going to buy one because it probably cost a huge amount of money to ship across the country.
Try it. Throw your hat into the ring. Even though
I know.
It's like seeing the results of the several, well, at least let's take this year, you know, the several auctions where we had some pretty amazing stuff come up. I'm like, I will. I'm going to bid it. You know, so there was one auction. I'm almost positive that was Prop Store, and earlier in the year, I think early summer, and I was ready with my finger, you know, like ready to click the bid now button, and you know, I'm sure you can guess it was a Captain Janeway uniform,
sure,
the one that went for like 30 grand or something. And it literally, like in those milliseconds that I was aiming to hit the bid now button, number quadrupled to the point I'm like, I don't have that much money on all my
Yeah.
cards. So yeah, but it's fun to watch. I mean, on one hand, I suppose that sort of represents the, again, a form of mainstream appreciation of the
Yep.
franchise. On the other hand, of course, your average fan most certainly cannot afford something like this.
No.
We can just, look on in envy.
Yes. And look on in envy we shall, though I might try bidding on one or two things, but I'm not going to say them out loud here on Weekly Trek because I don't want anybody bidding against me. All right. Well, and lastly this week, free streamer Pluto TV have expanded their Star Trek offerings, supplementing the existing channel that plays reruns of The Next Generation and some of more recent shows like Discovery and Picard with a new channel entitled More Star Trek, which will also include the original series and Deep Space Nine. No word yet on whether and how Voyager and Enterprise will make it to Pluto TV to round out the complete legacy Star Trek shows on the streaming service. Pluto TV is free, but it is ad-supported, so keep that in mind as you enjoy watching a wide selection of Star Trek content. Marina, have you ever watched the Pluto TV's Star Trek channel?
No, I actually have to admit I'm awful in that way. It's like I'm aware of its existence.
Yeah, me too. Right.
But I realize that I watch extremely little TV these days. And I don't know if that's sort of something that came out of pandemic, because I suddenly discovered that not only I watched very little. I mean, it's mostly actually probably Trek, but I lost the ability to binge. So go figure. But it is exciting that they keep doing this. I'm actually curious. Like, what if they decide to add, let's say, Enterprise and Voyager to the mix? Are they going to do like more Star Trek channel? Like,
yeah,
right. On Star Trek channel number 23, which I'm all for it. The more Star Trek, we kind of have to continue the paradigm that anytime somewhere in the world Star Trek is on, and now considering that it's in the form of streaming, most certainly on. So yeah, good on Pluto. Keep doing this, and I'm sure a lot of people who don't necessarily own physical media or don't have streaming channels, the ones like Paramount Plus or anything, it certainly gives them ability to watch at least the legacy series continuously. So that's a wonderful thing as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it's a fun way to watch Star Trek, right? Like, A, it's free, B, it's got most of it, and C, it's just like a fun way of just if you don't know what you want to watch, you just know you want to watch Star Trek and you don't want to have to go through the decision-making process of choosing what to watch yourself. It's just a fun way of watching Star Trek, right? Yeah. Just put it on and whatever's on is on, and then the next episode is whatever the next episode will be, and you just go with the flow.
That's exactly it. And the thing is that Trek still has that thing where, if the television is on, you pass by and you see Trek is on. You're like, oh, okay. And you sit down and you watch. It has that sort of like this Trek viewer effect, if you will. I mean, they had on board, speaking of the cruise, they would put on like little custom channels where, one channel would be showing all TNG and one channel would be showing all DS9 and so forth.
That's cool.
And it's like they actually had stuff on repeat. So it's like if you watched, Encounter at Farpoint on Thursday, chances are it's going to be on again, like in 12 hours, on Friday.
Okay,
so that's that sort of thing. But regardless, like you would turn it on. It's like I caught they were showing First Contact, and so middle of Caribbean. My sister and I are sitting in our room eating fries and watching First Contact.
Ugh, love that. All right, well, we've talked about the facts, and now let's speculate on what's going to happen in the future of Star Trek.
You make some very good points, Captain. But it's still all speculation and theory.
So each week, my guest and I give you a wish or theory we're nurturing about any of the shows or the future of the franchise. So Marina, let's hear your theory or wish for this week.
Wish. So since we're already, spoke so many
we wish for an official Star Trek convention.
Well, that is one thing, but you know what? At this point, seriously, I am kind of, I'm pulling back and I'm waiting just to see what,
we'll go
whenever
with the flow.
Somebody has something. I am glad that I have the foundation in Vegas, because that has been my cornerstone for the past, starting from 2010, so more than a decade of my life. So I'm glad that it's there. Thank goodness. Everything else, I'm just gonna take it as it comes, and I want to see what, when somebody's gonna say something, and make decisions based on whatever information is going to be available at the time. As far as the, that sort of thing, I do have a wish. So Prodigy is wonderful. I'm loving it. I actually, my wish is just to see what the heck is going on with Chakotay, because it's sort of like, obviously everything is being pushed by Vice Admiral's desire to find him.
Yep.
So we know it's out there. We know that Robert Beltran recorded a whole lot of stuff for this thing. At least he implied that he worked on more than one episode. So what's going on out there? Are we gonna is it gonna be actually resolved by the end of season 1, or is it gonna continue on? The arc is gonna go on into season 2. Something I would, my wish is just to see, like, give us a snippet, something like, a flashback, him doing something, or perhaps, a cut to what he's actually up to. Is he being held captive somewhere? Did he get time travel? Is he in the future now? I don't know, a little bit, something.
I feel like, I don't know if the Chakotay story is going to be resolved by the end of this season. In fact, I feel like I heard Kevin and Dan Hageman say that it wouldn't be, but I do feel like they probably will take a big step forward, and certainly the last episode of the season is going to directly tie into the Chakotay thing, right? It feels like it just has to. It's been such an undercurrent for the whole season so far. So even if we don't find him, I think we will at least know where he is and what has happened to him.
I certainly hope so. I'm just amazed at how, like, the more you think about it, for going back to when everybody was like, thought that was going to be just a child's cartoon, but just how amazingly layered the show is, with like everything between, the characters that we know, the legacy stuff that's going on, to brand new things, to tying in all the little bits and pieces from the past, from the future, and it's just amazing. I love Prodigy so much.
All right, let me give you my theory, which comes back to the prop store auction.
Oh,
but it doesn't really have to do with the auction itself. It's more about what's not in the auction than what is.
Oh yeah,
and that's that. My theory is that the fact that there are no season 2 or 3 Starfleet uniforms, any of them, and there are no actual production-made, screen-used Picard-era comm badges or rank pips that were included in the auction says to me that a sequel, subsequent, also set in the same time frame, 25th century show is at least under consideration.
Oh, I like that.
Because if it wasn't, you would have just sold all that stuff, right? They're done with filming.
Now, question for you. Do you think it's in the form of another series or potentially a movie?
Could be either.
Did you see the most recent interview with Frakes?
Yes.
And the implications that, like, he kind of referenced to something, what Patrick said during the Star Trek Universe panel. It all kind of like, I'm like, are there talks?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, they were very open and teasing about the stuff as far as Janeway's return to live action.
Right.
It's almost like, I'm like, well, they're like, a step away from just saying yes, but yeah. So I'm like, what, is it all kind of ties in? Are they going to pull in like multiple TNG era legacy characters and have a go at a movie? How about that?
Now, it's possible that they are planning a second Picard auction, right? After season 3 is aired, sell off all the main character, a Riker, a Troy, a this, a that, a the other, right? Like big, big sort of costumes, big props, and that all that stuff will then come then. But it's over now, and it's a season 1 and it's a season 2 auction, and notably, there's just, right, with the exception of a stunt Admiral Picard and a Starfleet Cadets uniform, that's the only season 2 uniforms you have, and the badges in the Discovery auction were far and away the most valuable sellers in terms of the amount of money they spent for what you actually got for it, right? Like, yes, there were other, right, the Captain Pike costume sold for like $50,000, but the badge sold for almost $20,000, right? And like, that's a tiny little badge. And yet, all of the badges that are in this auction, with the exception of the flashback stuff, right? They've got, TNG era badge and a Voyager era badge and Confederation timeline badges, but they don't have any of the 25th century Picard era comm badges. The only ones they have are ones that are attached to the costumes, and they're specifically noted as having been made after the show just to pair with the costume. They did not have sort of a connection to, they were made by the production, but they were not for the production. They were for the auction. And like, that makes sense, right? Like, you hold on to things that you want to use again, and you don't give away things that you want to use again. And so the fact that there's really nothing from season 2 or even season 3 Starfleet, there is one season 3 item that snuck in, which is the first contact era phase, although actually I guess that probably could have came from Picard's office. But the fact that there are none of these badges, none of these rank pips, none of these things that if you were going to do another Starfleet something in that time period you would want to have, tells me that. It doesn't tell me it's going to happen. It doesn't tell me that, you know, they secretly are working on the successor show to Picard and like any of that. I firmly believe that they are still in the talking phase about it and like figuring out what comes after Picard as the sort of fifth show on the slate. But if you thought there was a world in which you were going to need it, you would hold on to it. And it looks to me like they think there's a world in which they're going to need it, so they're holding on to it. And that is very exciting.
Yes, it is. And I love this theory, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed that some version of it will actually see the light of day. It's a great theory.
Because it's just like, it feels like if they were really done with this time period completely, there were many more iconic pieces that you could have included in this auction.
Yeah.
And the fact that they didn't tells me that Paramount has a reason to hang on to them.
Well, we'll see.
Do you have a theory or a wish for Discovery, Picard, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, or Prodigy that you'd like to share? Tweet them to me at WeeklyTrek, for as long as Twitter exists, or email them to me at weeklytrek@thetricordertransmissions.com, and I might feature your theory in a future episode. Well, that's all the time we've got for this episode of Weekly Trek. Thank you so much to my guest, Marina Kravchuk, for joining me today. Marina, how can people contact you if they want to continue the conversation?
Thank you, first of all. Thank you so much for having me. This has been, mostly fun. But no, it's always great to talk things over, you know, talk Trek. You can find me online, primarily on Facebook, actually, under my full name. I'm one of the admins for the Star Trek Convention Experiences group, which thankfully is it's a little bit quiet right now, but I'm sure it's awaiting its boom as we move on into the next year. My little side project with the unofficial missions group is obviously right now hanging in the air. We shall see what's going to happen there. And of course, my friend Jesse Okendo and I, you know, do our little show, the Shore Leave Your Star Trek Convention podcast, which at the moment is also in limbo as we kind of reach the point where things tend to be quiet, but we hope that we're going to pick up as we get closer to the Star Trek cruise. You can also find me on Twitter, again, for as long as it's there, as you said, at Dracorex, DRAKKOREX. As a matter of fact, I use this handle pretty much everywhere, such as Instagram. And that's a first, actually. I am also now on Mastodon, even though I haven't posted there yet. I'm sort of just trying to figure this platform out yet. So same handle, Dracorex, and the server is mastodon.phrase.com, and phrase is FRAIZE, and that's of course the server of the wonderful John from Star Trek Unlimited. So we'll see you out there. I mean, social media is not going anywhere. If not Twitter, something else will pop up, but I sincerely hope that things will get better. Perhaps, you know, too naively, but we shall see.
And you can find this show on Twitter at WeeklyTrek and me at Alexander T. Perry. And if you enjoy the show, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast player of choice. And please check out some of the other great shows on the Tricorder Transmissions. And if you like our shows, please also consider becoming a Patreon of Tricorder, which you can find at patreon.com/the Tricorder Transmissions. And lastly, if you're looking for Star Trek news on the internet, I hope you will turn to trekcore.com. Well, thank you, Marina. Thank you to all of my listeners. And until next week, live long and prosper.
Keep tracking, everyone.